Hey everyone, this is Bruce McIntyre again, CEO of the Oklahoma Parkinson's Alliance. And we're moving into episode 2 with Denise Brown, who has a world of experience and expertise in family caregiving. I want to remind you also that you may have seen our organization name change from Parkinson Foundation of Oklahoma, which we've been for a number of years, just rebranding, renaming to Oklahoma Parkinson's Alliance. Same mission, same people, same organization, new name. So that's us. And we do all kinds of things all over the state. We have 3 caregiver support groups specifically. So if you've never connected with one of those, this might be a great time. Go to our website at oklahomapa.org. So I want to introduce again Denise Brown. She has been serving family caregivers since the 90s. Started a website in 95, 96 when none of us even knew what that was, and is the author of a number of books. In fact, if you go to Amazon or her website, you probably will find numerous options of great caregiver books and resources. She has been recognized nationally in numerous publications, and we are so glad to have Denise back with us today for episode number 2. So take it away, Denise.
Bruce, thank you so much. It's always a thrill to be with you and to be with all of you who are joining us today to watch. So I worry a lot. And people would say to me, stop worrying. 90% of what you worry about won't happen. Here's the thing, in our caregiving experience, in essence, it happened. What people told us not to worry about actually happened to us. And I think once you have something happen that you think, wow, this is life changing, it's hard not to worry. And I think if we look at our worries as the enemy, we give them more energy. I'm not saying that our worries are our friends, but I think we can look at them as our frenemies. They are part of our day, and we can actually use them for our own good purposes. So let's hear our worries and then think through, what is this worry telling me? So I have a very simple statement about my worries that I find very helpful. And that is, every worry needs a plan. If I start to worry rather than just fret, I think, what's my plan? A plan could be a decision, it could be communication, it could be research, it could be taking a step, it could be actually removing myself to give myself a break because I'm just too stressed out. So every worry needs a plan. I teach a coach training program for former family caregivers, and we use what we call caregiving wheels to have conversations with family caregivers about what's going on in their day. So there's actually 2 wheels, and they both refer to this idea that every worry needs a plan. So here's the first one. It's the worry wheel. So rather than just saying, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to these worries, let's say what we're worried about. Let's actually name it. So the wheel helps us think about, what's the worry that really is keeping me up at night right now? And there's 8 different ideas. Now, obviously, this isn't an inclusive list, but it's just to spark our thoughts around, oh boy, you know what? I am worried about the future. I didn't realize that's what it is, but it's the future. And then if you think about worrying about the future, it could be so many different worries about it. It could be a worry for your own future. It could be a worry around your caree's future and the care needs in that future. It could be a future for other family members. And honest to goodness, I do think that sometimes we have worries about the future related to our world. We might be worrying about climate change. Now, that may seem like, how does that impact our caregiving experience? But depending on where you live, you might be starting to think, oh my gosh, the weather has changed where we live. And now I have to plan for weather emergencies. So it seems like just one worry when we get to the future, but there could be several worries. And that's the goal with this worry wheel, is to get a little more specific about what it is that's following us throughout our day and nagging us, nagging us. So, Bruce, what stands out for you when you look at this particular wheel?
Well, I tell you, one thing that I think of is right here through the window there in our Oklahoma City office. When we do loud crowds, and we do 6 of them per week here in our Oklahoma City office, um, we often have an unofficial caregiver support group that meets in our lobby. And it's not on any of the books, it's just people who show up along with the Parkinson patient. And as they talk and support each other, they're often talking about these items on the worry wheel. And, for the vast majority of people, whether you talk about it or not, money is a little bit of that worry. We're not sure. Will we have enough? Will it cover enough? I mean, that is a latent, persistent concern for so many people. But also progression, what's going to happen, how fast, because you don't know with Parkinson's. Some folks progress really fast, some folks do great for decades. And so the future is such a source of uncertainty. You just don't know what's coming next. So, I mean, those two right there in that little quadrant, I feel like I hear a lot about those, but also in that group of unofficial caregivers, or sometimes it isn't our official caregiver group, that we hear Parkinson's caregivers, whether it's in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Lawton, all over the state. I mean, it's a safe place to talk about your feelings. It's a safe place to talk about, we used to be able to do this, now we cannot do it, which is a feeling and a loss. I mean, so we could go all the way around this circle and probably add another circle as well. But yeah, totally hear these every day, every week from our Parkinson's caregivers in Oklahoma. So you're right on the money.
What's interesting too is the words relate to each other. How do I spend money today so I have enough money for our future? How much time do we have left? How do I use our time together effectively? How do I feel about the fact that I'm watching time go by? I feel like I'm losing a connection to what made me feel great about life. How will I take care of myself? How will I continue to care for someone in the family? What's enough? Our third in the series is going to be about enough. What's the right decision about money? It could all just put us into this spin because it all relates. And I think with money too, you start to worry about, when's the rainy day? Because it always seems like it's a rainy day during caregiving. So how do you know the rainy day has arrived and it's time to spend some money? Because you don't know how many rainy days you have to plan for. It makes sense that we're worried. We are living in an uncertain situation. We know when caregiving began, we don't know when it's going to end. And then we have conflicting emotions about thinking about the end of caregiving. We want the end to pain and suffering, but then we think, oh my gosh, there's an end. There's a finality to it, our Carrie's death. How do we talk about that? How do we work it through and reconcile what death means? Oh my gosh. I mean, we can really stay in our head, and the worries stuck in our head just really zap us of energy. And what we want to do is use our energy in the best way possible. So if we name a worry, then we have an opportunity to put a plan in place for it. So on our plan wheel, we have some ideas about what you could actually do about a worry. So we could build support. We could build a team. We could build a foundation. We could meet with a financial planner. We could meet with our support group and ask, how are they managing this specific situation? We can communicate. Something with my parents that I realized is, once I started worrying about something, my best next strategy was actually to say it to them. Here's what I'm worried about. And I would say odd things to them about what I was worrying about, and they always received it and then talked it out with me. And I always felt better, like, okay, now I know what to do. I've got a plan. And oftentimes it was communicating about their wishes. I didn't want to make an assumption. I didn't want to jump to a conclusion. I was worrying because I didn't have enough information. So communicating is how I got more information. And then I could put a plan in place about what to do if such and such happens. Then I could also think about, I might not have enough time in my day for everything. How am I going to get all this done? Well, who can I delegate to? And it might not be that I'm going to delegate caregiving tasks. It could be that I delegate something else in my life to other family members, to technology, and sometimes it's delegating it to another day. Years ago, Bruce, you and I had a conversation about this right now pressure. When we start to think about what needs to happen, we think, oh my gosh, all this has to be done right now. And instead, we can think about, well, really, what is the one thing right now? And what else do I delegate to another day? So, Bruce, what do you think about the plan
Yeah,
wheel?
I like it. And I think in that conversation you're referring to, sometimes caregiving, and I've been a caregiver for my wife now for 18 years. And, early on, it was so helpful to identify people, and it still is, who are ahead of you on the path, who know things you don't, who can do things you can't. That part's so important. But also, I'll pick up on what you were just saying about that previous conversation that we had along the way. And it is that sometimes caregiving feels like a move. It's like there's 372 things to do all the time, but you can only do one. You can do one thing right now. And if you can just identify the one, give yourself a break on the others and just focus on this one thing. So that's kind of along with the idea of delegate. And sometimes it is like, I got to delegate 371 things to some other day. But today, this is the one that I'm going to focus on and deal with. And then I'm going to give myself a break.
Absolutely. You know, the word change on the plan wheel might seem like, oh, we don't want any more changes. But I think sometimes we haven't caught up with what needs to change because of the changes. So, for instance, thinking about a carrier's declines, and then are we managing the declines based on what life was like 2 months ago, rather than making a change so it reflects what's happening right now? We all have a different way of managing the process of change. And I think that's important for us to remember too as we plan for changes. So, for instance, you were talking about connecting with someone who's ahead of us. Sometimes I feel like I'm ahead of my dad, for instance. I was ahead of my mom in terms of her accepting what was happening. And I used to wonder, how do I reconcile that we're at different places of accepting the change? And what I realized is my mom could be where she was with the change. I could be where I was and be prepared for the impact of the change. So I could have conversations with my siblings about, okay, I see this happening. I talked to mom. She's not ready to do anything about it. What do you guys think? I could talk to healthcare professionals. I could do some research on Google. So rather than feeling like, oh boy, we're at different places with a change, I've got to try to push her, I could just let her be where she was and then gather more information so that when she was ready to move into what had changed and to accept it, I could meet her there. And I felt like it was much more powerful if I stayed in the truth of what was happening and allowed her to process that truth at her own pace. And then when she realized it, I brought myself into her truth in a much more compassionate, caring way. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, well, it took you forever to accept this. It was, okay, we're on the same page. Let's move forward together.
Yeah, I think that this dynamic, Denise, happens in every single family. Only the names change. That you have, I mean, I see it over and over and over and over again. I see it in my own family. that one person sees the issue, diagnosis, and gets to a solution in fifth gear really fast. Other people are stuck in first and second and third gear going at different speeds. And there's always someone who refuses to admit that there's a problem and wants to put it in reverse and say, no, 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 we're going back to the way things were, when everyone else knows things will never be exactly how they were. And this dynamic happens in every single family.
It's hard. And it can be really frustrating too. And I also think we get caught up in the worry around it. How do I convince? How do I get everybody on the same page? What's the consensus that I can get everybody to? And if I have a plan that is, I'm just going to keep communicating and checking in to see how people feel, then that's helpful. And I also realized that if I just stayed open to, for instance, my mom saying, oh, okay, I'm ready for this, then I didn't have a huge response to it. I just was able to say, okay, I'll make the phone call. I'll set up the appointment. I'll get the equipment. It was a very much, I felt like a kindler way of saying, okay, we're both accepting something that we really don't want to accept. Neither one of us wanted it to be true. If I stayed in the truth, I could beat my mom's truth with compassion. And it just felt easier.
One thing that was super helpful to me was to hear the idea that everything is not a problem to fix. And if you're like me, you're a problem fixer. You find a problem and let's fix it. But what I heard was this notion that it's not, everything is not a problem to fix. Some things are a tension to manage. And in a long-term chronic health situation like Parkinson's, you really can't fix it. You can't cure it yourself. You can't make it go away. Instead, what's happening is you're managing that tension. And so as you go through and you find other people who can help, people who know things you don't, people who can do things you can't. And by the way, that's not what people do who are powerless. That's what people do who are taking control of the situation and utilizing what power they do have in the situation, because your neurologist knows things you don't about the nature of the disease and how it works. There are caregiving organizations, there are people like Denise who know things you don't about the dynamics, and they can shed light for you on your circumstances that help you do better in those circumstances. There are organizations and companies who can come in to help do things you can't do as you manage the tension. And so in managing that tension, you utilize home care companies sometimes, or home health companies sometimes, and they know things you don't, they can do things you can't. So everything's not necessarily a problem to fix. A lot of these things are a tension to manage. So Denise, you might bring back up that wheel there. I think we maybe lost you there for just a second, but we took hopefully a helpful scenic tour. And
I'm
hey, this is
so
caregiving
sorry.
at its best, right?
I'm
Unexpected
so
detours.
sorry. I'm
No
so
worries.
sorry. Yes, I'd be
So,
happy to. Do you mind just making me a co-host and then I'll share for you?
yeah, that's right. So let me do that, and then let's take a look at it again, because the wheels that you're showing us are so relevant to our experience in caregiving, and so relevant here with the idea of taking what control we can to create our plan. And sometimes it's just that 20 seconds of a small activity that nudges us over into the arena we need to be in.
You know what else too? So for instance, we had a technical glitch. So you pivoted. So sometimes our plan is to actually pivot, and we can think through our what ifs. Our what ifs are actually a worry. And I know that people do tell us, oh, don't borrow trouble. We're not borrowing trouble. We're being very pragmatic about the reality of our situation. So the what ifs walk us through different scenarios and then help us create a plan if the what if happens. And I think that makes us feel so much better. It's the uncertainty that's so difficult. What if puts us in a place of uncertainty? Planning in case the what if helps us feel in better control. There was a great book I wrote many years ago about how people survive a disaster. And the truth is, if you're going to solve it, if you're going to survive a disaster, you've survived because you've put a plan in place. So, for instance, when you get on an airplane, there's a couple things that you can do right off the bat. You can count the number of rows from where you sit to the exit. And that way, if there's a disaster, you don't have to think, where is the exit row? You've already counted in your head. So your mind remembers, and then you just walk to the exit row. It's the same in caregiving. I think it's so helpful for us to know that we can plan just in case. And if the just in case happens, we're not spinning out of control. We are walking to the exit row. We are getting off the plane. We are moving to a safer place. It's interesting that this wheel has the word replenish on it. When we were talking about the recovery plan in our first video, you talked about as part of your recovery, you like to replenish. And I think the word replenish is so beautiful because it reminds us we can replenish ourselves, but there's also ways that we can replenish. We can replenish, for instance, what gives us comfort. So if we're worried about the next day and how long it will be because it's a series of appointments or it's a long day of treatments, we can think, you know what, we're going to replenish when we get home with food that I've bought on Sunday that I already prepared. We can think about how do we replenish our spirit so we stay connected to hope. Well, we replenish our spirit by practicing our faith, however that looks to us. We replenish the relationships in our life that are important to us. We give them time. We make them a priority. We stay curious about what people in our life that we love are up to and what they're doing. That gives us energy. And we can stay replenished with nature. You talked about in our recovery plan video, staying connected to nature. Nature is so healing. So if we know it's going to be a hard day, we can think about, you know what, the end of the hard day, I'm going to take some time to walk through my neighborhood because that replenishes me, that connects me to nature. And then I just want to mention something about ask. It is such a powerful skill to be able to ask good questions. And we often think about asking good questions of others in our life. And the truth is, we can ask ourselves a good question. So I had a period of time in my life where I was really in a tough situation and it didn't look good for me. And I thought, oh my gosh, wow, what am I going to do? And so I crafted this question that I asked myself when I would take a walk. And I would say, how will this situation work out for me in a wonderful, lucrative, amazing way? So when I was thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? How is this going to work out? I would take a walk. And as I walked, and walking is also very calming movement. So I would walk and then I would ask this question, how will this work out in a really wonderful, lucrative, amazing way? And then guess what? The situation worked out in an amazing, lucrative, wonderful way that no one would have ever thought possible. So we can ask questions of our carees, of our healthcare professionals, of others in our life, as well as ourselves. And the questions we can ask ourselves can open up possibilities for us, can open us into a different perspective about the reality of our life and what's possible for us during this life of caregiving. Okay, Bruce, what do you think?
Well, I think you've provided a really helpful tool because, at different times, different ones of these are more relevant than others, but they're all very portable, very practical for us in a across the spectrum of caregiving experience. Folks listening to this, some people are maybe 8 weeks into this situation. Some people are maybe 28 years into it, and the set of circumstances that come our way change. but the dynamics of these types of needs remain the same. So I think you've really provided a great tool.
So when you're in a worry, rather than judge yourself for worrying, look to your worry as a prompt for a plan. And then think of your plan in an expansive way so that every time there's a worry, there's a plan.
Denise, thank you so much for being with us here on this second session. And so again, I'm Bruce McIntyre, CEO of the Oklahoma Parkinson's Alliance, and we are so glad to share these resources with you from Denise. And we'll see you again for the third episode coming up pretty soon. We'll see you for today.